Have you ever thought about like what it really means to be a global citizen in today's world?
It's a question that comes up a lot, right?
Yeah, and one thing that keeps popping up for me is like this idea that knowing another language,
Right.
it's not just like a cool party trick anymore.
It's becoming kind of essential, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like you kind of feel it in your gut.
Yeah.
But is there like solid evidence for this, or is it just like a hunch we have?
Well, that's what we're here to find out, right?
Yeah,
We're all about evidence here.
exactly. So let's get into it.
Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive into a whole bunch of research on this.
Okay.
Specifically, we're looking at studies published between 2012 and 2019 that investigated the benefits.
Okay. So fairly recent stuff.
Yes, very recent. And they looked at the impact of foreign language learning and bilingualism,
Okay.
not just for the individual, but for society too.
So like the big picture stuff.
Exactly. The big picture now. This was a pretty comprehensive analysis.
Okay.
It included 100 empirical studies from all over the world.
Wow, 100. That's a lot.
It is. And they pulled these studies from 7 major academic databases.
Okay. So they really did their homework.
Yeah, they were thorough, and their goal was to uncover the proven benefits of knowing more than one language.
So basically all the good stuff that comes with being bilingual.
Exactly. So let's get to the juicy bits.
Yeah. What did they actually find?
Well, 6 major themes emerged from all this research.
Okay.
The most prominent one, and this is no surprise,
Okay.
was about cognitive abilities and how bilingualism can actually change how we think.
Okay. So that's like brain power stuff.
Exactly, brain power. The next theme was about aging and health and the benefits there.
Okay. That's a big one.
Huge. And then we have employability and career opportunities.
Makes sense.
Then academic achievement, communicative, and intercultural skills.
Okay. Getting more specific now.
Yeah, and finally, a link between bilingualism and enhanced creativity.
Okay. Now that's interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
So most of the research focused on those cognitive benefits you mentioned.
Yeah, over 70 of those 100 studies.
Okay. So that's where we should start then, right?
Definitely, let's jump into the brain stuff.
All right. Let's do it.
So when we talk about cognitive abilities, we have to start with what's called executive functioning.
Executive functioning.
Yeah, or cognitive control, sometimes you'll hear it called.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that one.
Think of it this way. It's like your brain's control center.
Okay.
It's responsible for things like planning, focusing your attention,
Okay.
holding information in your mind, and being able to switch between different tasks.
So like multitasking.
All those mental gymnastics we do every day.
Right. So how does being bilingual affect all of that?
Well, what's really cool is that a lot of studies suggest that bilingualism is like a workout for your brain's control center.
Like mental weightlifting or something.
Exactly. For example, they did research with 6-year-old kids.
Wow, that young.
Yeah. And the bilingual kids consistently outperformed the monolingual kids on tasks that required executive control.
So the bilingual kids were better at focusing and stuff?
Exactly. And this idea was backed up by other studies, too.
Okay.
They found that engaging with 2 languages, especially from a young age, can actually strengthen a child's ability to handle challenging mental tasks.
So it's like brain training.
Exactly. And there was another interesting study with Hispanic children.
Okay.
They found that the kids who were more balanced in their proficiency in both Spanish and English
Okay.
did better on cognitive tasks that didn't even involve language at all.
Whoa. So it's not just about knowing words.
Nope. It's about having a good grasp of both languages.
That's really interesting.
It is, and it goes even further. They found that balanced bilingualism in young kids is linked to better task initiation,
What does that mean?
like being able to get started on things more easily, and they also had faster reaction times.
So bilingual kids are just like quicker on the uptake.
It seems that way, but of course not every study showed a clear advantage.
Right. There's always variation in research.
Always, some studies found less consistent evidence of a bilingual advantage in some executive function tasks, especially with middle-aged children, so there's still more to learn there.
Makes sense.
And one study actually suggested that bilinguals might be a bit slower in accessing specific words.
Really? Why is that?
They think it might be because both languages are so active in their minds.
Interesting. So there's competition going on up there.
Yeah, kind of. And they also found that the similarity between the 2 languages a person speaks can affect how their brain processes language.
So if the languages are more similar, it's trickier.
It seems that way. Another finding was that early acquisition of a second language is important for those executive control benefits.
So the earlier, the better.
Yeah, it seems that way, but even if you learn a second language later in life, there are still advantages.
Like what?
Well, some studies suggest that bilingualism can lead to enhanced cognitive control by reducing interference between the two languages.
Okay, so you're better at keeping the two languages separate when you need to.
Exactly. But this seems to depend on a few things.
Like what?
Things like how immersive the language learning experience was, how proficient you are in each language, and even the writing systems involved.
So like if they use different alphabets?
Yeah, exactly. It's a complex picture.
Definitely sounds like it. So you mentioned some sub-themes within this executive functioning area, right?
Yes, 4 specific aspects were studied in more detail.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, we have inhibitory control.
Okay.
Now, this is fascinating. There's a model that suggests
Yeah.
that the bilingual brain is constantly managing the activation of both languages.
Okay.
So you can focus on the one you want to use and suppress the other.
So it's like a mental filter for language.
Exactly, a very sophisticated one, and a lot of studies support this idea.
Okay.
For example, one study followed elementary school students over time,
Yeah.
and they found that the bilingual kids got much better at inhibiting irrelevant information compared to the monolingual kids.
So they were better at blocking out distractions.
Exactly. Another study showed that a higher level of proficiency in a second language was linked to greater inhibitory control in adults.
So the more fluent you are, the better your control.
That's what it seems like, and even early bilingual university students were found to have a stronger inhibitory advantage.
Wow, so it shows up in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it does, and here's a really interesting finding.
Okay.
Lifelong bilingualism has been associated with better inhibitory control and even some brain changes in adults with Huntington's disease.
Wow, so it could have a protective effect on the brain.
That's what the research suggests.
That's amazing. Okay, what's the next one?
Okay, the next one is working memory.
Working memory.
You know that short-term memory you use to hold information while you're working on something?
Yeah, like my mental notepad.
Exactly. Well, studies found that any advantage bilinguals might have in working memory tasks could be linked to when they first started learning their second language.
So like the age they were when they started.
Exactly. And there's even evidence suggesting that people who speak multiple languages might have an edge in different parts of their working memory. But it seems that the bilingual advantage in filtering out distractions might be strongest in tasks that really push the limits of your working memory.
So when it's really tough, they have the advantage.
Yeah, it seems that way. And get this, they did studies on simultaneous interpreters.
Simultaneous interpreters.
Yeah, the people who translate spoken language in real time.
Oh, wow, that must be hard.
Super hard. And guess what they found?
What?
They tend to have larger capacities for both verbal and spatial working memory.
So their brains are just built for that kind of mental juggling.
That's what it looks like.
That's so cool. Okay, what's the third one?
Right, the third one is attentional control.
Attentional control.
Yeah, that's all about how we focus our attention and block out distractions.
Okay.
And several studies showed that bilinguals have an advantage in this area.
Really?
Yeah, especially those who became bilingual early in childhood or in adulthood.
So it seems to work both ways.
It does, but there was one study that didn't find this advantage.
Okay.
It was with bilingual immigrant children from lower socioeconomic backgrounds.
Oh, so other factors can come into play.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that these benefits aren't always uniform.
Right. Everyone's different.
Exactly. Now, the final sub-area within executive functioning is cognitive flexibility.
Cognitive flexibility.
Yeah, that's all about being able to switch between different ways of thinking or different tasks smoothly.
Okay.
And they actually found that bilingual toddlers showed a larger brain response to unexpected stimuli.
Oh, wow. They could actually see that in their brains.
Yeah, they used brain imaging techniques. It was really cool.
That's amazing.
And this suggests that bilingual kids might be more flexible in how they allocate their attention.
So they're more adaptable.
Exactly. And other research showed that bilinguals were more efficient at changing their approach when the demands of a task changed.
So they could roll with the punches better.
Exactly. It seems that bilingualism might make you more mentally agile.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what was the next big theme under cognitive abilities?
That would be metalinguistic awareness.
The linguistic awareness. That's a mouthful.
It's basically a heightened awareness of language itself.
So like be able to think about language as a system.
Exactly, like having an inner linguist in your brain.
Okay, I kind of get it now.
So they did some research with preschoolers,
Okay.
and they found that bilingual kids sometimes develop an understanding of other people's beliefs in a different way than monolingual kids, and they showed metalinguistic awareness earlier, too.
Interesting.
Yeah, several studies with elementary school children also showed that bilingual kids had advantages in school and in overall metalinguistic proficiency.
So knowing two languages actually helped them understand language better.
That's the idea, especially when their first language was supported at home.
So parents speaking their native language with them?
Exactly. And guess what they found with students in immersion programs?
What?
They developed metalinguistic skills in both languages.
Oh, wow. So it works both ways.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And while some studies showed that even beginners in a second language might get some metalinguistic benefits,
Okay.
the level of proficiency really matters.
So the more fluent you are, the better.
It seems that way. And they even found evidence of these skills transferring between languages.
All right, how so?
Well, there was research with Korean students learning English and Chinese English bilingual children.
Okay.
And they saw that metalinguistic awareness in one language could support development in the other.
So it's like a skill that builds upon itself.
That's exactly it. And one study even suggested that metalinguistic awareness can help adults learn a third language.
Wow, so it's like a superpower for language learning.
Kind of.
Okay, what's the next
The
subtheme?
next one is just called cognitive development.
Okay, so more brain stuff.
Yeah, this is about the broader impact of bilingualism on how our brains develop and change over time.
Okay.
And they've done some really cool studies using brain imaging.
Like MRIs and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And they found significant changes in the prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex.
It's a key area for attention and executive functions.
Okay.
And these changes were seen in early bilinguals.
So bilingualism actually changes the physical structure of the brain.
That's what it looks like. Other research has shown unique effects on brain structure and information processing in people who have been bilingual their whole lives.
Wow, so it's a lifelong thing.
Yeah, and there's also evidence that early exposure to a second language leads to changes in the brain areas associated with language.
So it's like the brain is wired differently.
Exactly, and the age when you first encounter that second language really matters.
So the earlier the better.
It seems that way. But here's something else cool.
What?
Even immersing yourself in a foreign language as an adult can change your brain.
Really?
Yeah, it can actually increase the brain's plasticity.
So it's never too late to learn.
Never too late. And it seems that learning multiple languages might be different than just learning a second language.
How so?
Well, multilingual people might have an advantage when it comes to picking up new languages.
Wow, so it's like a snowball effect.
Exactly. And they also found that bilingual preschoolers from lower socioeconomic backgrounds developed inhibitory control faster as they transitioned to kindergarten.
That's really interesting.
It is, but it's important to remember that some research suggests that bilinguals might use different strategies than monolinguals.
Okay.
And this could sometimes mask any underlying performance differences.
So it's not always a clear-cut advantage.
Exactly. And there's even some evidence that bilinguals might have disadvantages in certain aspects of metacognitive processing.
What does that mean?
It's about thinking about your own thinking.
Okay.
So there's still a lot more research to be done in this area.
Definitely a lot of complexities.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to linguistic processing and reasoning.
Okay.
This is about how bilinguals and monolinguals acquire and use language in their thinking and decision-making.
Okay.
For example, they did a long-term study with young children in Head Start programs. Yeah, and they found no difference in Spanish vocabulary development between bilingual and early bilingual learners,
Okay.
but the study did highlight the need for support in their linguistic processing skills.
So even if they know the words, they might need help using them.
Exactly. And in another study, they found that bilinguals had an advantage in core statistical learning.
Statistical learning.
It's a basic ability that helps us learn language.
Okay.
And it seems that the act of switching between languages might actually contribute to some of the cognitive advantages we see in bilinguals.
So that back and forth is actually good for the brain.
That's what the research suggests.
Interesting.
And they also found that your previous experience with languages can affect how easily you learn new ones.
So if you've already learned a second language, it's easier to learn a third.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they also looked at how prior knowledge affects how children weigh different cues when they're processing language.
Okay.
And there's been research on the long-term effects of early second language study on knowledge transfer.
Knowledge transfer.
Yeah, like how learning one thing can help you learn something else.
Yeah.
And they found some pretty complex patterns over time.
Makes sense.
But here's a really cool finding.
What?
Bilingual children were more flexible in figuring out the meaning of words from the context.
So they're better at using context clues.
Exactly. And this suggests that they might be more efficient vocabulary learners overall.
Wow, so all those advantages add up.
They do. And the final subtheme under cognitive abilities is spatial reasoning.
Spatial reasoning.
Yeah, that's about how we understand and manipulate objects in space.
Okay.
And they found that bilingual 8-year-olds were more accurate in tasks that required them to take another person's perspective.
So like imagining what someone else sees.
Exactly. And they also did a study with multilingual medical students.
Okay.
And they found that these students had higher scores in both spatial and verbal intelligence.
Wow, so they're good at both.
They are. But interestingly, this didn't always mean they got better grades.
Huh. That's surprising.
It is, but it shows that there's more to academic success than just intelligence.
Definitely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
There's so much research on the cognitive benefits of bilingualism.
It's amazing. But what about the other benefits you mentioned, like aging and health?
Ah, yes. This is where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm all ears.
10 studies specifically looked at this.
Aging and health.
Yes, and most of them pointed towards significant benefits for bilinguals as they age.
Really, give me the details.
Okay, well, they found that bilinguals have higher levels of what's called cognitive reserve.
Cognitive reserve, what's that?
It's basically the brain's ability to cope with damage or age-related decline.
So like a buffer against cognitive decline.
Exactly. And several studies also found that bilinguals might experience a delay in the onset of dementia symptoms.
Really, that's huge.
It suggests that knowing and using another language could help protect your brain as you get older.
That's incredible.
And other research showed that bilingualism is linked to more positive aging overall.
So they're happier and healthier.
It seems that way. And they even did a study where they followed people over time.
Okay.
And they found that bilinguals performed better on tests of general intelligence and reading ability later in life.
Really, even if they learn their second language as adults?
Yeah, even then. And another study showed that older bilingual adults who were given specific instruction were better at learning the grammar of a new language.
So they were quicker learners.
Exactly. And they even found a link between the number of languages a person speaks and their cognitive abilities later in life.
So the more languages, the better.
It seems that way, but of course, as with any research, there were some studies that didn't find these benefits.
Right, not everyone's the same.
Exactly. Some studies had neutral findings on the prevalence of dementia in bilinguals.
Okay.
And one study didn't find a clear advantage for bilinguals in attentional control, specifically in older adults.
So there are always exceptions.
Always, but the overall trend is very positive.
That's really encouraging.
It is. So what about employability?
Yeah. How does knowing another language affect your career chances?
This is another area where the research is pretty convincing.
Okay, tell me more.
8 studies looked at this, and they found that having foreign language skills beyond English is incredibly valuable in today's globalized world.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Especially for building strong business relationships internationally.
So it's not just about getting by, it's about building connections.
Exactly. And there's also a lot of support for promoting multilingualism in education.
Like teaching kids more languages in school.
Exactly, because it can open up so many job opportunities.
So it's not just a cultural thing, it's an economic thing too.
Definitely. And there's been research showing how language skills courses can actually improve healthcare professionals' ability to communicate with their patients.
Especially patients who speak different languages.
Exactly. And this leads to better care for everyone.
That's so important.
It is. And a European study found that oral foreign language skills were crucial for finding jobs and building good customer relationships.
So being able to speak the language fluently is key.
Absolutely. But here's an interesting thing. They did a survey of employers in the U.S.
Okay.
And they found that while employers said they valued multilingual employees,
So,
this didn't always translate into them actually hiring people with those skills.
really? So there's a disconnect?
Yeah, kind of, but even so, there's been research showing that multilingualism is a huge asset for refugees and migrant families.
Oh, so.
It helps them bridge linguistic and cultural gaps, and it's often seen as a key to getting ahead in their careers and integrating into society.
So it's definitely a valuable skill.
Absolutely. Now, what about academic achievement?
Yeah. Do bilingual kids do better in school?
Well, 4 studies looked at this specifically.
Okay.
And in Saudi Arabia, they found that starting bilingual education early didn't have a negative impact on students' literacy skills in their first language.
So it didn't hold them back.
Exactly. In fact, a study in South Africa even suggested that teaching kids to be biliterate,
Biliterate.
meaning they can read and write in 2 languages,
Yeah.
could actually improve their English reading comprehension.
Wow. So learning a second language can actually help your first language.
That's what the research suggests.
That's fascinating.
It is. And there was another really cool study on a Mandarin English immersion program.
Okay.
And they found that the kids in the program not only developed great literacy skills in Mandarin,
Okay.
but they also did better than their peers in English language arts and math in later grades.
No way. So they were ahead of the game.
Exactly. It seems that immersion programs can really give kids an edge.
That's amazing.
And in Russia, they found that bilingual kids who spoke Tatar at home were more likely to get higher grades in subjects like literature and chemistry.
Even though those subjects were taught in Russian.
Exactly, and they didn't see any negative impact from the kids using Tatar.
So it's not like one language takes away from the other.
Nope, it seems like they can both thrive.
Okay, that's really good to know. So what about communicative and intercultural competence?
This is a big one, especially in today's world.
Yeah, we're all so interconnected now.
Exactly, and 4 studies looked at this specifically.
Okay.
And one study found that a French conversation class significantly improved undergraduate students' ability to understand and relate to other cultures.
So they were more culturally aware?
Exactly, and their awareness of cultural differences also increased.
That's great.
Yeah, and another study found a strong link between cultural empathy and cross-cultural communication skills among Chinese English majors.
So the more empathy you have, the better you communicate.
It seems that way, but one study also found that just taking a beginner language course might not be enough to develop intercultural competence.
You need more than just language skills.
Exactly. You need a focus on cultural understanding, too.
Makes sense.
But on a more positive note, they found that an Awakening to Languages program for preschool kids
Okay.
had a really positive impact on their oral comprehension and their attitudes towards cultural diversity and language.
Wow, so starting young is key.
It seems that way. And finally, let's talk about enhanced creativity.
Okay, this is the one I'm most curious about.
It's a fascinating area. 3 studies explored this link,
Okay.
and one study found a positive correlation between language learning skills and overall creativity.
So people who are good at learning languages are also more creative.
That's what the study suggests.
Interesting.
And another study found that advanced English as a foreign language learners were much better at divergent thinking than monolinguals.
Divergent thinking, what's that?
It's a key part of creativity. It's about generating multiple solutions to a problem.
Oh,
And they found that the bilinguals were much better at this.
wow. So bilingualism could actually make you more creative.
It's possible. And finally, they compared simultaneous bilinguals.
Simultaneous bilinguals.
Yeah, people who learned 2 languages from a very young age
Okay.
with successive bilinguals, those who learned their second language later.
Okay.
And they found that the simultaneous bilinguals were more flexible in their nonverbal thinking.
Nonverbal thinking.
Yeah, like thinking that doesn't involve language. And this suggests that early simultaneous language learning might boost creative thinking.
That's amazing.
It is. So what do you think?
I think this has been a really eye-opening deep dive.
I agree. There's so much research supporting the benefits of language learning.
And not just for your brain, but for your whole life.
Exactly. It can affect your health, your career, your education, your relationships.
And even your creativity.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the most important takeaway from all this research?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the evidence is overwhelming.
Okay.
From 2012 to 2019, study after study has shown the benefits of foreign language learning and bilingualism.
It's not just a hunch anymore.
Nope, it's a fact. And it's not just about those cognitive benefits we talked about.
Right.
It's about everything. It can benefit your health, your career, your understanding of other cultures.
And your creativity, too.
Absolutely. And the research also really highlights the importance of starting language learning early and keeping it up.
And valuing those heritage languages. So for you, our listener, think about this for a minute.
Yeah.
What's one area of your life where learning a new language, or maybe brushing up on one you already know,
Right.
could make a real difference?
It could be for your career or to connect with your family history.
Or maybe just to challenge yourself and keep your brain sharp.
It's up to you.
So go explore those research areas we talked about today and see what sparks your interest.
You never know what you might discover.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.